Thank you for inviting me to speak at the school here. The trip was a beautiful trip over Route 112. We knew the area, but we knew the Mohawk Trail only up to Greenfield. So coming here was an extra treat, really. And I just think back now, the subject of my talk here, and hopefully of many of your questions, because I know what I have to say, I know what my story is, but I would like to hear what you're thinking on the subject, what your feelings are, and what your questions are. It's really unbelievable. I made a few notes, so I shouldn't forget anything. I would need probably a half a day to talk about the whole thing, but I will just touch the subject in different aspects. It's 59 years ago now that I left Vienna. In July, it's going to be 59 years ago. It's absolutely unbelievable. The regular world ended for us in March, and we left in July. I left with my father. We started an emigration, and what emigration meant was not traveling as a tourist, meant running, hiding, being scared, crossing borders without papers, hiding behind buses so you are not seen by the border controls. And now, 52 years already since the horror of the Holocaust had ended, and we are still hurting. Matter of fact, possibly we are hurting even more now than we heard it before, because it took us a long time to speak up on the Holocaust. People were very surprised when they heard that it took us 40 years, basically, to open up to what happened during the war. It's not an easy subject. And you have to remember that through Hitler exploded the accumulated Jew hatred of 2,000 years. It finally burst into the open, but it must be said, racial anti-Semitism was not a German, it was an international phenomenon, and it still is. It was Hitler who, with German efficiency and thoroughness, with all too willing cooperation of men of many nations, almost accomplished to make Europe Judenrein. Judenrein means free of Jews or clean of Jews. But not only Jews were persecuted and were murdered. 5 million other people were also killed, of all other origins and faiths. Christians, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, Slavic people, dissidents, intellectuals, and others. We grieve for them as we grieve for the Jews, but there's only one all-important difference. Hitler never intended to exterminate all the Russians or all the Poles or others, but he intended to exterminate all the Jews, and the Jews had to die because they were Jews, because they belonged to the people that gave the world Jesus and the code of ethics which the world has never been able to live up to. The Church teaches us that all mankind shares in the guilt for the death of Jesus on the cross. And so does all mankind share in the guilt for the death of millions of men, women and children in the gas chambers. Franklin Hamlin Littell, a Methodist minister, quotes Reinhold Niebuhr, his teacher, who said, and I quote, "It still has to reach the North American Protestants that the Holocaust is for the Christianity as much a tragedy as for the Jewish people, because the Holocaust happened within Christianity. It was accomplished by Roman Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox baptized people, which were never called to account for, much less excommunicated. It was not accomplished by ignorant people, standing on the edge of civilization, but by professors and doctors of philosophy and medicine who were educated at the best universities of the world. End of quote. The Holocaust would not have worked without good German folk, French, Austrians, and others who hustled to get on the bandwagon, willing dupes of the Nazi propaganda. And still I don't believe in collective guilt. 3/4 of the population of Germany and Austria living today was not born or was too young to have anything to do with the war. We know collective guilt. We know it too well, having lived with it for 2,000 years, when we were wrongly accused of having killed Jesus Christ. Remember also that the Holocaust did not only happen in Europe. The Holocaust happened in Washington, D.C., in Ottawa, in Rio de Janeiro, in Buenos Aires, in Johannesburg, and I forget the other capitals of the nations of the world. Why do I talk about them? Because they closed the door to us. They did not want us. Also, let us not forget that April 24th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, is the Memorial Day for the Armenian genocide. In the 1930s, Hitler was asked whether he feared risking the world opinion. What is the world going to think of him and of the Germans persecuting the Jews? And he said, who now remembers the genocide of the Armenians? That was just 20 years before, 1915, when 1.5 million Armenians were killed by the Turkish people. And the world didn't care. The world had just forgot about it. Evil is contagious. Unchecked cruelty grows and spreads. The survivors know better than anyone else the potential for destroying human dignity. But we also know that one can refuse the evil and choose the good. The late Pastor Martin Niemöller, we met his wife in Washington, I believe it was 83, 84, explained the consequences eloquently when he said, and I quote, "In Germany they came first for the communists, and I did not speak up because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I did not speak up because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up." Even today, there is a disease in this country, in this land, more widespread than AIDS, which can develop with frightening speed if it is not promptly stopped. Within the memory of many of us, it caused in Europe more than 6 million Jewish deaths in 5 years. Yet it still smolders, is even cultivated in our land. And the trouble is that many who suffer from it will even flaunt their infection in private while taking utmost care to conceal its symptoms in all public discourse. The disease is anti-Semitism. It is really difficult to believe that self-styled Christian folk who proclaim the divinity of the Jewish founder on their face can numb their memories to the point where they no longer see any connection between the coming of the Holocaust and the nasty doctrine that they secretly cultivate. I wish these people could gaze at the mementos of that organized implementation of prejudice. The great pile of human hair from the heads of women who had just been murdered, the heap of children's shoes removed from the feet of the little boys and girls before they were marched into the gas chambers, and the revolting collection of human teeth pulled from the mouths of thousands of fresh corpses so that the gold they contained might be used to finance the German war machine. Let me now speak a little bit about myself. I come from Vienna. I'm born in Vienna. And as I said, I left Vienna in 1938 through Italy to France. And what I would like to remind you and tell you, because you probably don't know it, that France in 1938, 1939 was the only country who accepted religious and political refugees, no questions asked. And we crossed the border illegally. We had no visa, we had no permits, we had no papers to come into France, and they accepted us. I pointed out and I emphasize it because many people knock France, many people throw France in the same basket with Germany and Austria. There were many French people who were collaborators, yes, true, but there were many French people who were not. People who helped, and thank God they did, because without them, we wouldn't be here today. Neither myself, neither my wife would be here today. In 1939, World War II started. My father volunteered for the French army, and having been a dentist, they immediately recommended him, and he was accepted by the Royal Air Force, and he was stationed with them in Le Mans, which is northern France, okay. That's where the Royal Air Force had their airport. And he worked for them as a dentist. I was too young at the beginning of the war, so I was home then till the 1st of January 1940, where I became, for French purposes, legally old enough to serve in the army. I joined the army. I had a short stint, I'm not going to talk about it really, in the French Foreign Legion, who after 1 week left me behind when they went to Sidi Bel Abbes because they found something illegal in my birth date. I gave him the right birth date, and I should have lied about it, and they would have taken me. Anyhow, so I volunteered in the French army. The French army was no great shakes at that time. We're talking 1940. And I played a few months soccer on the French army soccer team, and then they finally discovered, hey, there's what is called in French, le drôle de guerre, the funny war is going on in northern France, so maybe we should wake up, maybe we have eventually to defend ourselves. And that's when they sent me then to the north, to the Vallée de la Loire, and I was stationed in Angoulême. France collapsed, as you know. We signed an armistice, and I was sent home. How was I sent home? The captain of my company, of our division, called me to the office, said, you know, you better get lost. Here's some money, here's some civilian clothes, and get lost, because if the Germans break through the lines in the Vallée de la Loire, you're not only going to be a prisoner, you'll be a prisoner, an ex-Austrian, and a Jew. And if they catch you, you know, got 3 armies going against you, you better get lost. And which I did. I hitchhiked cross-country from the northwest, sort of, to the southeast, back to Lyon, where my mother still was. I did all kind of jobs then in Lyon, and finally wound up as, like Professor Schurter mentioned before, I wound up as a barman in a restaurant called Le Moulin à Vent, Place Bellecour in Lyon. And I didn't know anything about the profession. So, and I said right away to that's the employment agency of the veterans who sent me there. I said, I don't know anything about being a barman. Don't worry about it, they'll teach you. And you know, in France at that time, there are no cocktails to mix or anything like that. All we had is wine, beer, and aperitifs. And I remember vividly, especially, I had to serve very often a panaché, which was a mixture of half beer and half lemonade, which was awful. But anyhow, that was my job. And, but he was teaching me for a few days. My boss was teaching me for a few days, breaking me in. And then I approached the counter, and there were some elegantly dressed men sitting there in civil. But you could see the suits were impeccable. And I listened a little bit, and I heard German. Didn't say anything. Didn't tell anything to my boss because I didn't want him to know who I was. And that went on for a few days, and then finally I broke down and asked my boss, who are these people? And he says, don't you know, these are the people from the Gestapo. That's the one who live across the way in the Hotel Royal. Ah, surprise, surprise, okay. I continued to work there. I lived at home still at that time. I continued to work there, and quite a few times it happened that they ordered something in German. And then I played dumb. I said, moi je comprends rien, il faut me parler en français. You better talk to me in French. I don't understand German, you know. And they all spoke German, French naturally, otherwise they wouldn't have been in the Gestapo in Lyon. So they ordered it in French. And, but you know, any mother, maybe even more a Jewish mother, even if you're 20 years old, she gets after you and said, no, don't work there. How can you work there? It's too dangerous. I mean, it's crazy. Why you don't need the money? Why did you work there? And I didn't listen, and then finally I listened. And I stayed home, and I remember it exactly. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember that on Wednesday night I came home. And why do I remember it? I didn't go back on Thursday. I remember it because they still owe me the salary for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I never went back for my salary. I was scared then already. My mother really injected me with that scare, you know, that I was scared I didn't go back there anymore. And then a while later, the place was blown up, bombed into bits by the French resistance, with many of the very same Gestapo people in the bar. They didn't get Klaus Barbie, unfortunately. Whether I served Klaus Barbie, I don't know. I don't remember the face, because you see, I knew Klaus Barbie from pictures in uniform, but they were all in nice clothing, so I don't know. But he probably was, because he was part of them. He probably was a customer there. The place is now a beautiful monument in memory of the people of the resistance and all the French people, Jewish people, whatever, deported from France. To give you an idea, we have been there since, naturally. And the first time I came there and I naturally wanted to take a picture of that monument. And it's a corner building, and the bomb caved out the corner. And they never rebuilt it. And they left the corner like a cave and put the monument underneath the corner. And behind the monument is a beautiful plaque with the names of the concentration camps in France and in Eastern Europe, Germany, where people from France were deported to. And I tried to take that picture. And I moved back on the sidewalk, and I couldn't go far enough on the sidewalk to take that picture. I had to take two pictures, the upper part and the lower part. I never realized until that moment how many camps really there were. And there are not even all the camps there. There are only the camps French or people from France were sent to. There were so many camps, we were absolutely stunned. And from there, then I went to a village. I was a Boy Scout, was Boy Scout leader for many years. And so we camped very often in the Haute-Loire, which is southwest of Lyon, about 2 hours drive now, 2.5 hours drive. We camped in the mountains, it's the mountains of the Massif Central. And we got to know people there, and they were nice and friendly people, and we felt comfortable there. I was with an interface Boy Scout movement, but especially I was in charge of the Les Éclaireurs Israélites de France, which is the Jewish Boy Scouts. In France, we do have officially religious Boy Scout movements. Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, and interfaith, okay? So I was involved with the interfaith, but in particular with the Jewish Boy Scouts. So we got to know many people up there, which are wonderful people. Why were they wonderful people? We found out in talking to them, in getting to know them better, because they were all of Huguenot background. Protestants who years ago were persecuted by the Catholics. Protestants who had a feeling for us and what it means to be hiding, being a refugee, being persecuted. 95% of the population of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon is Protestant, 5% is Catholic. Interestingly enough, when you talk to them, naturally they complained about each other. The Catholics sat on their hands and didn't do a thing. And the Catholics didn't say much about the Protestants because the Protestants were the majority. But I had an injury up there and had to be brought to a hospital to Lyon, back to Lyon, and I owe my life to Saint Francois d'Assise, Saint Francis of Assisi, in a convent hospital where I was operated on and later on hidden. So when I came back to Chambon and we talked about prejudice or discrimination, or about knocking religions, you know, I said, you see, you said the Catholics sat on their hand. Now, if the Catholics wouldn't have existed, I wouldn't be here today. And that's what I usually also bring out when I go to schools. I do not like ethnic jokes. That's what I tell the kids immediately. And I don't like to put labels on people. We're not good because we are a Protestant or Catholic or a Jew or Muslim or whatever. We are good because of what we are and what's in our heart or soul. It doesn't matter, and I don't like to put labels on people. And that's what I also told the good Protestants up there. The beautiful thing about that village is, but I appreciate very much, and I talk about that village quite often because the village became officially a righteous Gentile, was named by the Israeli nation as a righteous Gentile, which means the village has a plaque and a tree planted in their memory at Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. These 5,000 people, it's a village like Lennox, where we live right now. And when I just think back, would Lennox be able to do what these 5,000 people did during the war? No way. No way. These 5,000 people risked their lives to hide approximately over the 3 years, 42 to 45 now. It started early already, but let's talk just about the 3 years. Hiding 5,000 Jewish children, some adults too. They saved 5,000 Jewish children. And you know what it meant to save somebody during the war? Your end was just as assured as the end of that Jewish refugee, this Jewish hidden child you were having in your house. You were deported and killed. And it happened to the doctor who took care of me when I had my knee injury, because he gave a ride in a car to resistance fighters, got caught on a German blockade, and they didn't believe that he had nothing to do with the two guys he picked up on they were hitching a ride, and that was the end of him. So helping meant assured death. You could not do that, and these people did. Just try to put yourself into the shoes. Try to imagine something like that happen to you. Could you do that? Would you do that? And there is a beautiful book written about it by a very good friend of mine, Philip Hallier, who was teaching at Wesleyan University. The book is called Lest Innocent Blood Be Shed. I would strongly recommend you to read that book. One evening, 2 evenings, and you have read it. No fiction. It's the God's honest truth about that village. And there's one thing which stands out, two things which stand out to me. The leader of the group, of the village, was the pastor of the church, André Trocmé. He died many years ago. We still met his wife in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, she died not too. And when you came to that village, to the church, and when you entered the church, it's a little old stone church, and over the door it says, and this is the whole story of the righteous people, of any righteous people. Over that door it says, aimez-vous les uns les autres. Love one another, which means care for each other. And this is the story of the righteous people. If we do care, things like that hopefully won't happen again. But unfortunately, since the Holocaust, it happened again. I came from that village, from my injury, I came back to Lyon, and as I told you before, I was in the hospital St. Francis of Assisi. Eventually from there, I was walking on crutches, and I had to go into Switzerland. And we organized something. I took the train to the Swiss border. On the Swiss border, an ambulance waited for me. I got into the ambulance. My parents were with me. And I was faking an emergency appendectomy. And what happened then, we had to go from the town. I just got into the ambulance to the town where the hospital was. The road was going through no man's land. No man's land is a part of land which is between two nations, between two borders. So we had to get out of France without entering Switzerland. Okay? So when we got into no man's, we were stopped naturally by the French and Germans at the border, and they asked what's going on, and the ambulance driver said it's an emergency appendectomy, I had to bring him to Saint-Julien, and I was moaning and groaning. My parents were sitting next to me, and we were holding our breath. Naturally, what was it? It was a 50-50 chance. Are they going to believe it or not? And he believed it, and they cracked the door, and he said, go on, hurry up. And then we drove into no man's land. I got out of the car, out of the ambulance, and walked into Switzerland, where within 1 kilometer or so, I was promptly caught by the Swiss army and put into a camp. A camp, and the first camp of many camps I was in Switzerland in, but nothing, please do not think, I pointed out now, do not think these were camps like the German camps. These were not concentration camps. These were holding camps. We were restricted, our activities, we couldn't get out. There were walls, barbed wire around it and all that, but these were not camps where we had to hunger. We were getting just about enough to eat. I mean, because Switzerland was in a war, their excuse was we are not in a war. I mean, Switzerland was neutral, but the countries around Switzerland were in a war, and we didn't have enough to eat, and we can't give you that much to eat. We had enough to eat. And when we got out into the village, there were some good Swiss folk who gave us their ration coupons so we can buy some other things. It wasn't that bad, but we were refined in a camp. We could not move around freely. Soon after, the borders were closed in Switzerland, and no refugees were accepted, and that then became the very famous saying, "Das Boot ist voll," the boat is full. Okay. The Swiss didn't accept any people anymore, and just matter of fact, if you got into Switzerland and they caught you, they brought you back to the border and put you right into the hands of the Germans. So Switzerland, you know, it's very popular now. It's modern now, because you saw the thing in the paper, on TV probably, about the money which is hidden in Switzerland. Not only Jewish money, there's lots of German money hidden there. And you know, the Swiss bankers are very smart, you know. You deposit the money, you come and pick it up. No, go tell Hitler or Goebbels or Goering to go and pick up their money, you know. The money is there, you know. They gave some money back to the German government, but not everything they have, and there's plenty still there. Switzerland is, for many years, when we thought about Switzerland, not I, because I talked about it since I left, when we talked about Switzerland, for you, Switzerland is watches, cheese, and chocolate, you know, and the beautiful Alps and the skiing and all that. But it isn't quite so. There was I remember, because we just in November we were in Vienna and we went to a lecture by a woman who was saved by a Swiss policeman who turned the other way as she crossed the border from Austria into Switzerland in 1938. And when the Swiss authorities finally got wind of that, because he did that quite often, there were about, I think, 1,000, 1,100 people like that who crossed the border. And when the Swiss authority finally got wind of that, they fired him and the pension was taken away from him. He was a regular Swiss border policeman. He became, again, reinstituted, but that was after his death, and the family got the pension and all that. But the Jewish community tried to prevail on that, and they sort of rehabilitated him, but too late, he had already died. I returned into France afterwards, when the war was over. Oh, let me tell you something else. I had talked to Mrs. Neyman before, and something I forgot to mention there, we talked about Switzerland. And in 44 or so, 43, 44, when the Swiss saw that the Allies are going to win the war, then they suddenly became a little more liberal, a little nicer to us. And they let us out, young people, they let us go to school. And I went to school then because I wanted to make my baccalaureate. So I went to school in Zurich. And one of the first things a school classmate of mine by the name of Dreyfus told me when I told her who I was, "Why did you come here? Do you want Hitler to come here too, to get us all?" Not telling me, "I'm so happy you saved your life, you're here." No, why I came. That's Swiss. So I returned to France then and immediately went back into the Haute-Loire, into the mountains where I was before, but then it was peace already, and we reorganized the youth movements, and we took care of children. They were camping up there, children who had lost parents, who didn't know where the parents were and all that. It was a group of 4,000 youngsters who were in the Haute-Loire at that time. And that's about all I can tell you about myself. I mean, I can tell you much more about it, but that's all for the time we have. Something I just remembered now, which I think is very important, which you should know too. Both my wife and myself, we had fake ID cards. We needed them to survive. And my name is Max Kauler, MK. And we were looking for ID cards or names, fake names, which sort of relate to our real name, because when we get caught, we want to have something to fall back. Not because we have initialed handkerchiefs or shirts, don't think that. Because we wanted something to remember when we get caught, when people interrogate us. So I was getting a name, Marcel Cornier, MC, but there's no K in the French alphabet really. So it was an MC with a CO, so like Kohler, Cornier, okay, to remember that. My wife was Alex Grabkovich. Lixi is her nickname, okay? So she got her card, Lucien Genet, LG. But that's not what I wanted to tell you. We needed these cards to survive. My card was a fantastic card because it was an old card of somebody who had lived and died. And the man who did that for me was a high school principal in Chambon-sur-Lignon, who was the town historian, who had access to stamps and all that. He took the picture out of that old guy and put my picture in there, the engraving stamp. How he changed that, I don't know. The ink, naturally, you can erase, sort of, and he did that. I had a real good card because it was an old card. What people did during the war in France, you know, you could go to the stationery store and buy yourself an ID card and then go to the authorities and fill it in. So naturally, you could have done it yourself too. But these would have been new cards. So what people did, they bought these cards, they had these cards, and then they rubbed butter or bacon or something on it to make it old looking, dirty looking, you know. But it doesn't look handled. It looked dirty, but it did not look handled. So my card was an excellent card. I was 2 or 3 times I had to show, maybe 4 times I had to show it in Lyon, and I was never bothered with it. But you know what we did at the end of the war? Not thinking about anything, because we are not looking for medals, we are not looking for acknowledgement or anything like that. But the moment we were liberated, we took these cards, tore them into pieces and threw them away, because we were so happy to become again Max Kauler and Lixi Grabkovich. And you know when I missed that? When I applied for Social Security in France, which is incidentally called Sécurité Sociale, I applied for Social Security. They asked me where I was between 42 and 45. And I couldn't tell them. Because Max Kauler didn't exist at that time. So I needed affidavits from people who knew me, which I added to it, and then I got the thing. I mean, it was straightened out. But that's when I realized, why did I throw away the card? The cards weren't important. You have any questions? Yes?
Yes. I'm possibly going to elder care, and it occurs to me that there may be many survivors in this forthcoming few years who may be facing long-term institutional care. How can the caregivers help them? What can caregivers do to ease what I imagine would be a traumatic experience for some people who have been through the camps in their youth?
Never make him talk if they don't want to talk about it. I give you an example. We were leaders for Holocaust Monument, which was unveiled in Pittsfield in 1987. I came a few days afterwards to the Blue Cross Blue Shield to straighten something out in my medical care, whatever. And there's that young woman who's talking to me. She says, "So you are the Mr. Kauler?" I say, "Yeah, what did I do?" "Oh, we read about you in the paper, etc., etc." Thanks to Big Dave, too, you know, who was a reporter then in Pittsfield. And so I said, "Yes, why?" "Oh, my father is a survivor." He was, I said, survivor. I said, was he in camps? Yes, he was in 5 or 6 camps. And she mentioned some of the camps. I said, "And what do you know else? What else you know about it?" "Oh, really nothing. He doesn't want to talk about it." So naturally, I became suspicious. God forbid. I would never be suspicious of somebody who tells me he was in a camp. But naturally, you want to know. So I said, "Has he got the tattoo, the number, the forearm?" She says, "No." I said, "Why?" "He had it surgically removed because he couldn't live with it." "Please give me his phone number." I went home. I called him. I was on the phone with him for about 2 hours. I called her back at the office. I told her the whole story. She says, "You know, Mr. Kauler, you know more about my father now than I do." He never talked about it. He didn't want to talk about it. And I said, "You know, why didn't you come forward? You saw it in the papers, the unveiling of the monument. We were looking for real, true survivors to help us with the unveiling because we wanted to honor you, if we can call it that way." He said, "No, I don't want to bother. I don't want to talk about it." If they don't want to talk about it, don't make them talk about it. If they do talk about it, listen to them. I had a friend in Pittsfield who was in 6 or 7 camps, who passed away in the meantime. it took me a long time to get the things out of him. Unfortunately, I didn't get the whole story because he passed away in the meantime. He was a tailor, and I used him for alterations, you know. And I went to him, and every time I went there, I got a little bit of a story. Got a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. So I got it together. They have a hard time talking about it. People ask me how come I have no hard time talking about it. I do have a hard time talking about it, but I got a big mouth, and I want the world to know what happened, because when we're gonna be gone, you're only gonna read it in a book. And give you an example of what it is in a book. We talked about that before. I was invited to speak in a school about selling to students a piece of good, learning languages, because French and English was so important to me, whatever I learned in school. And I was talking to the students, 10th graders, was talking to them, and I told them how much French helped me when I came to France. And they look at me, glassy eyes, like they don't know what I'm talking about. And I asked the teacher, Alicia, I don't think they know what I'm talking about. So she asked them, didn't you have the Holocaust unit in school last year, 9th grade? They said, no, Mrs. Krause, because we never got to it. It's at the end of the book, and we never finished the book. So the 9th grade was gone, and the 10th grade you get a new book, and that's it. It changed a little bit now, because thanks God we have Anne Frank, and thanks God we have Schindler's List. But do not, it's an educational tool, but please do not think that Schindler's List is the Holocaust. It's only a movie. It's only a movie. We didn't shed a tear watching it 3 times. I took teachers there, the group of teachers, I took ministers there. It's only a movie, but it's good, because what you get out of Schindler's List is more than you risk getting the rest of the time. Yes?
What is your impression of how aware the French people were in Lyon and other places, for example, as to the extent of the extermination and eradication of Jews in concentration camps? It's the everyday people that you're working with in bars now.
There are 80 million French. And as the saying goes, 40 million were collaborators and 40 million sat on their hands. I don't agree with it. Maybe 20, 20, and 40, maybe 30, 30, and 20. There were some good people in France, as I mentioned before, like the village I just mentioned before, or the people who helped us, you know. My wife was hidden in France. She wasn't even in Switzerland, okay? We didn't know each other at that time. She was hidden in families and in convents and in castles, which were run by the Swiss Red Cross, you know. So there were good people around, because any time, at any moment, somebody could denounce you and you're caught. I came home from the hospital because I couldn't stand it anymore. A Catholic hospital, what did I get to read? The nuns, all you saw is the face, you didn't even see the shoes. You know, I just imagined they had patent leather shoes, you know, nothing. And they were nice and they were friendly. But I was in the room most of the time with an old man who was dying, and I heard the last rites. And I mean, I was young. What did I do there? And it became boring. So I asked, please let me go home. And the surgeon said, you're crazy. Why would you go home? You're safe here. Stay here. I said, no, I want to go home. So I finally let me go home. I came home at 1 o'clock. The French police came and to tell me that at 7 o'clock tonight, we are coming with the Gestapo to pick you up. How did they know I was home? It was fortunate that that thing happened, because what did I do? I called the hospital. What did the doctor say? Didn't I tell you so? Went right back to the hospital, but I took my parents with me. What would have happened to my parents if they would have come without warning or all that? So my parents stayed with me that first night in the hospital. Where did my parents go afterwards? They went to live with friends of ours, French people, collaborators, loving the Nazis, for the great it's going to do France and the business and all that. It's about time that somebody's cleaning up the degenerate France and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They loved the Nazis, but they were not anti-Semites. They hid my parents in their apartment. Practically every night the Gestapo came there, they were wined and dined by these people. When they opened the door, the Gestapo never knew that they were passing in front of the bedroom door of my parents, where they were hidden. There's good and bad all over. You know, I always said, you know, we are thinking of the Holocaust, we are thinking what happened in Europe. And what years are we talking about? 1930, 40, okay? What happened in this country here? We were killing black people in the South. Who opened their mouth? We were taking the Native Americans, the Indians, and putting them on reservations. Who said anything? We took 120,000 Americans just because they were of Japanese ancestry and put them into camps. Nothing compared to the camps in Germany. Let's be honest about that. These camps, incidentally, if you have seen pictures, were very similar to the camps I was in Switzerland. That's about the idea. They put them in camp. What right? These were Americans. You know, there's good and bad all over. There are mistakes being made all over. What should I say? I mean, there were good French people. They were good. There were some bad ones too, yes.
I think we're going to have to call a halt right now.
Okay.
We got to vacate
Yeah.
the room shortly. And I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Kola for coming here and giving us
Thank you.